music supervisor at Trailblazer Studios, which is a full production house, but I work mainly in the post department. And I'm here to talk about opportunities in post for folks, for people of color, primarily Black and African American folks. I am here on behalf of two parties that I love very, very much, and that is the Guild of Music Supervisors Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, and also Post in Black, a fantastic podcast that highlights Black folks that work in post-production. And we have a couple of folks here from them today. Would you like to say some words, Dara? Daniel?
Daniel is here. I just want to thank everybody for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, panelists. It's just an honor, and hope you enjoy what everyone has to say today. And definitely check out all the interviews at postinblack.com. Madonna is just fantastic. Also, Aurelia, Kenneth, Bobbi. And Dara. So thank you.
My brother, what he did say is he founded Post in Black in 2009 as a blog, and it turned into a podcast about 3 years ago. So he's not in front of the camera, but I ended up hosting it, so I get to talk to all these wonderful individuals. And Dara, hopefully soon, we'll get to connect. So we interviewed Donna here, and she was like, "Why aren't you guys going to be at the Guild? We're doing a conference, let's host a panel." So this is all because of her and the brainchild and my brother's brainchild years ago. So thank you guys for being here.
Great, so we have an excellent panel of folks for you today. I am really, really excited about it. We have Dara Taylor, who is a composer, Bobbi Banks, who is a supervising sound and ADR editor, and Ken Johnson, who's a supervising sound designer and re-recording mixer. And what I'm going to do right now, so you get a little more of an idea of each of their backgrounds, is let them introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their work. We'll start with you, Dara. You're on the end.
Hi, I'm Dara Taylor. I'm a composer for film and television, and I've worked with many of the great people on the Guild of Music Supervisors, including Aurelia. I've been here in LA for almost 10 years, and I've just kind of worked my way up the ranks. I've done a lot of fun projects lately.
I think we have a clip of one of your projects. Is that right?
We do, yeah. This is a clip from The Tender Bar, which was a film that came out last year, directed by George Clooney and starring Ben Affleck.
Thank you. And I'll continue down the line, and then what we'll do is we'll open this conversation up to talk more in detail about what everybody does and what these opportunities look like in post-production, because we would like to see more of all kinds of different faces working in post. I know we're here at the Guild of Music Supervisors Conference. A lot of us are music supervisors, are aspiring music supervisors, or are musicians, publishers, etc. But a team like this is the kind of team that gets you to that end goal of a finished project, right? So it's all of these folks, it's all of us working together, and these are opportunities for everyone. So there's a lot of stuff out there, you just gotta go out there and get it. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about it. Ms. Bobbi.
Hi, my name is Bobbi Banks, and I'm an ADR supervisor, supervising sound editor as well. I've been in the industry over 30 years. It's a long time when you think about it. And some of the current projects that I've worked on The Batman, I was ADR editor, just finished on Chevalier, and now working on White Man Canton. And I think the clip that I brought, because we're with music people, is a scene that's very intense, and it shows how the sound effects and Foley work together with the music for this particular scene. And I thought that would be good to show. The reason why I picked that clip was because the thing about it is they're trying to get him to join the Aryan Nation. He doesn't want to, so he's so conflicted in his mind, right? And so that's why he's starting to throw everything around the room. So then you have the music, which is playing really, really low, it's subtle, And then you have him yelling, which is all the words and the reading we recorded in AR. And then you have the Foley with all of the, you know, the things breaking and stuff like that. And so then when he goes to sit down, right, and he pulls out the gun and you hear the music just kind of, you see what I mean? So it was just, it was important to me to show as to why I sound person. And Stanley Clark was the composer.
Thank you. And then we're gonna go to Ken, and then we're gonna open this up to a larger conversation. But Ken, I would like to hear from you.
My name is Ken Johnson. I am the founder of Artistry and Sound, which I believe to be the only 100% black-owned audio post-production facility that I've ever run across. You know, started that company around 2005 in my garage because I wasn't getting the opportunities in some of the larger houses that I worked in to ascend. And I decided that I needed to blaze my own trail and make my own path to where I needed to get to. So with that being said, I don't know what clip they're going to play. I brought two. Why don't you play? Do you have the Dara?
And we should. Is it on the document?
Maybe.
Yeah, I emailed it. She said that the diary won't be here. So I sent both. They were about 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. First, either one. Just try to- But anyway, we're trying to find this clip. It's, I did a movie for Disney, the animated version of Diary of a Wimpy Kid last year. It's in the animations, it's a little bit different because what they give us is the VO, and we have to create everything else because, you know, from the footsteps to the cars to the doors, I mean, everything that you hear other than dialogue, we have to create. So it's really fun, it's very creative, and I wanted to show that to you guys, if we can find it.
Okay, you're looking. All right.
Okay, so anyway, we did that. It was very successful. I'm now just finishing Dara of the Wimpy Kid 2, and I was also asked to do Night at the Museum, the animated movie, which I should finish final QC on that on Monday. So some of the things that we're doing right now.
Excellent. So I'm going to start with the easiest question, which is what is it that made each of you choose your specific specialties? Did you just fall into it? Was there a film that you saw when you were young and you were like, this is it, this is what I want to do?
Okay. So yeah, I was always sort of in music growing up. My mom was a choir director. Is this working?
I don't think so.
That's fine. I was always in the choirs and the musicals and bands and all of that stuff. So, but when I went to school, I couldn't really see a path in that, even though it was a thing that I loved. So I applied to school as a computer science major and took 0 computer science classes. And it was somewhere around sophomore year of undergrad. Because all I had known really is performing, and I knew I didn't want to perform. But yeah, it was somewhere around sophomore year of undergrad. I was just like, I was in my room. I'd always listened to a lot of film scores. I was listening to Harry Gregson Williams' score for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And then there was just like an aha moment. I'm like, maybe it's this. And then I just kind of stubbornly hung on since then.
I did not have such a path. And I actually got in by a fluke. I worked at Sound One as an administrative assistant, really knew nothing about film at all. And they actually had a recording studio on the second floor. They had mixing stages and editorial rooms and sound effects library. And so on my lunch hour, I would go see like what each department was doing. So I went into the sound effects library and put headphones on. I had 1/4-inch tape then, and totally how long ago. But and so then there was a splicer, and I noticed like there were some kind of noises and stuff. So I would kind of splice them in, and I realized that I was actually cleaning up the sound effects library. So after that, I wanted to work in the sound effects library, but they wanted me to stay in administration. And I was a single parent, and they go, well, you know what, we're gonna cut your salary. And I'm like, okay, because I'm a person that likes challenges, so they didn't expect that. But, so I did that, and I started choosing effects for clients after that. A little while later, I went back to administration because they needed me. Then I was just like, I got to do something else, because working in the sound effects library, I realized I was technically inclined, so I really wanted to mix. By that, in 1980, there were no women mixers that I'm aware of, and it was going to take 5 to 7 years that they told me. I was like, this takes too long. So what they did was, instead of you could work in the machine room, which is with the patch bays or running a mix, that kind of thing. So they gave me 6 weeks to learn everything. I had a little notebook with pictures, and ran my first mix after 6 weeks. And so I did that for a year, and then I got bored. So I'm like, okay, now what do I do? So I quit, and I started giving out my resume. And then I worked on Desperately Seeking Susan, Madonna's first film, was my first apprentice job. And we worked like 60, 80 hours a week for 6 weeks, and so that was my introduction. And all of this is in New York. I moved here to LA, and I got a job within a week at Canon, which at the time the union, there was a 5-year wait to get into the union. And the union wanted Canon to sign a low budget agreement. So they wanted us to strike. So being, coming from New York, how it is. It's like, so what do I get if I strike you? So they go, what do you want? So I said, get in the union. So I got in the union within the first year that I was here. So, thankfully I've just had really good, teachers, and I worked with Beth Bergeron, who did ADR, which is automatic dialogue replacement, where the actors have to come to the lines again. And that was her expertise, so that's what I fell into. And then John Singleton hired me as an ADR supervisor for the first time on Poetic Justice. And after that, worked on all of John's projects because he's just very loyal. And so I learned a lot during that. And so now I'm still doing ADR, and now I'm supervising sound as well, which entails all the different areas of sound, and that's it in a nutshell.
How about you, my friend?
Well, my journey is a little different. I don't know how many people from LA, but I was raised here. I grew up in Nickerson Gardens housing projects. Was involved in the gang life. And, just at one point, just got tired, and I decided that I wanted to change my life. So I was like, well, what do I want to do? So at that point, I was like, I like music, so maybe I'll become a musician. So I taught myself how to play bass, and joined some groups, and got pretty good at it. Did some traveling around the world, and got really intrigued by the technical aspects. Because, we'd go in the studio, we were doing our own original stuff at that time, and I would watch the engineer, and I was like, that looks really interesting. So I decided I wanted to now be an engineer. So I went to school and got a degree in recording engineering and music production, and did that. And I was the first engineer, so I guess I was pretty successful. But I was getting calls for like midnight calls, and I wasn't real happy with that. I wanted like a regular kind of job. So fortunately, at that time, my sister was vice president of feature production at Universal, and my brother was the first assistant director. So I reached out to my brother first, and I said, hey, is there any opportunity? So he said, well, let me put you in a production mixer and see how you feel about that. So I did some shows. I was like Utilities, Second Boom, and just sort of watching everything. And I said, these are some long hours. And they were talking about traveling, and I just had a baby, and I was like, nah, this is probably not what I want to do. So I called my sister, and she said, well, let me introduce you to someone. So that was this gentleman named J.R. Delane, who at that time was the executive vice president of this company called Todd A.O., which at that time probably was the biggest audio post-production facility. And I met with him, and I said, well, I want to be a mixer because, I've been mixing music. And he says, well, you can't come in here and be a mixer. He said, your best route would be to become an editor. and then transition. So he said, well, you got dialogue editing, ADR editing, and then you got sound effects. And I was like, I'll take sound effects. Because that seemed more, for me at the time, it seemed more creative. Because I didn't really know what it was about, but it just sounded good. So I went to a couple classes, and you know, he had me sort of sit with people for like 3 years. And I finally got an opportunity on Noah's Place, and that was you know, my first show. And it's kind of like, we just grinding ever since.
Nice. Okay, this is really interesting to me. So I'm not gonna get into this because this panel is not about me. But what I will say is working in a post-production facility, a lot of the sound designers and sound mixers that I work with are also musicians. It is not an uncommon path at all to see a musician move into film and television, dialogue editing, sound design, all of it. It's a lot of the skills are very transferable. I see a lot of interns come out of music programs, and the first jobs that they get aren't at recording studios, they are at post-production houses. They're coming in already knowing Pro Tools, already knowing how to work with the plugins. It's a really easy transition. So if this even interests you a little bit, even though it might be a diverging path of what you thought you were gonna do an internship, shadow somebody, and see if it's something that you'd wanna continue with doing. But continuing on here, my question is, especially since this is technically a music conference, let's discuss how all of your roles, you know, sort of work together with the music department, with the music editor, with the music supervisor. I know for me, I love having mixers and designers who are also musicians, because then we get into conversations, especially with sound designers, about what key are the sound effects in, what key is this drone in, is it going to clash too much with what is already in the composition. So I have yet to hear about anybody doing this, but I do like to have my composers and my sound designers in contact with each other, so that we can work through those issues, so that we can work as a team. If you have any examples of, you know, this teamwork concept, I would love to hear about them.
Kenneth, for your mixing, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, I'm a re-recording mixer as well as a sound designer. You know, I work a lot with the music supervisors and the composers to do the final mix. Depending on the project, a lot of times, like Aurelia said, we like to get in touch with specifically the composer, just to make sure that we're not doing double work or stepping on each other, right? So either we're going to work in concert on a moment to create, whether it's tension or anxiety or happiness or whatever it is, right? Or, you know, or I'm going to take it, or the composer's going to take it. So we kind of try and figure out what that balance is. You know, they'll usually deliver me, like on Night at the Museum, they delivered me 712 stems with objects, right? And for those of you who don't quite know, like, we're doing a lot of Atmos mixing now. And so objects just allow you to be more pinpoint accurate within the sound field, right? So that if, say for instance, in music, like say if I had some chanting, right? And I wanted to say, set it here and set it there. In an Atmos environment, no matter what theater or room we go in, it's always going to remain there. Whereas in the traditional mixing environment, whether it be 5171, it may move, but it's locked there in Atmos. It's always going to be there. So they delivered me, which was great, they delivered me 712 stems and, you know, and objects. Now sometimes I would get stereo tracks that were like, say, the cello, and then the drums, and then the strings and the violins and all of those things, maybe on separate stereo tracks, in which case I would have to upmix those things, right, to accommodate whether it be 5-1, which is, everybody know what that is, right? No? Yeah. Okay. It's basically surround. You have, you know, the left center right speakers, you'll have, in 5.1, you'll have left and right, surrounds, and sub. And as the number increases, you just got more speakers, right? And with, as far as the music editor, what they do is usually with the source music, the more diegetic type of music, whether it's like, it could be two things. It could be either like, say, music that's being played in a room on somebody's stereo. In this case, I would treat it to make it sound like it's actually coming from there. I'd have to do some EQ and stuff like that, and do some reverb to make that happen. Or it may be what we call scores, right? Which is really, it's like used as score, but it's really what we consider source music, which could be, you know, a song, or, you know, it could be a beat, you know. So my job is to take all of those elements that are given to me by the composer and the editor who works for the music supervisor, and just mix those things into the soundtrack so that, you know, I'm going in and around the dialogue, because the dialogue tends to be what we focus on most in most films. Unless it's,
They don't need to
yeah, I'm sorry about
We can edit it later, see?
yeah. So that's kind of what I do in relationship to music. I hope that was helpful.
No, that was helpful. Dara, why don't you talk a little bit about how you work with a post team?
Yeah, so it was really interesting to hear it from Ken's point of view too, because usually I'm the one that's sending stuff to them, and it's like, I hope they're fine with this. But no, I mean, a lot of times music editors is my conduit to whoever is going to be mixing, and a lot of times the sound effects as well. So sometimes in spotting sessions or in playbacks, I just did a horror movie called The Invitation that's I think still out there. And there was, you know, especially in horror, there's a lot of different elements, especially because my score sometimes has some sound design elements, and you're finding that line. So either in spotting or in music playbacks, I will ask, because a lot of times we're kind of playing against temp sound effects too. So I'll ask, you know, is sound going to take this? Are they going to be down low? If so, I will be high. Because again, I don't want to fight with them. We're all going towards the same goal here, to tell the most effective story we can. So, and then there are times where I'll notice that there's a pane somewhere, like an elevator pane. And I mean, sometimes I just play around it too, and sometimes I like to, like, you know, build up to a pane if it's a comedy or something like that. But also, to Aurelia's point, talking about, you know, the keys of those things. If I need to stay in a particular key because there's a song coming up and we need a smooth transition, and I can't move around it, I'll ask, or I'll, you know, a lot of times I'll talk to my music editor and say, hey, can you check and see if sound can either pitch this down because it's rubbing right now, or if this is going to be the final thing, or just something like, I'll just throw out things for people to pay attention to, which I'm sure they notice in the mix as well, but especially if, you know, mixes are fast and there's a lot of opinions, and so anything I can kind of prepare people for earlier on, the better. And at the same time, somewhere along my process near the end of it, I'll ask, you know, I'll tell the music editor, these are the stems that I'm thinking about, and I'll put them in my music mixer on a thread, and then the music editor will then go and talk to, you know, someone like Ken and ask, hey, is this our 14 5.1 stems okay? Or do you want a mixture of 5.1 and stereo stems? Like, do they want to spread things, or should we pre-spread things? So it's a lot of trying to find all those, you know, finding all the landmines first, because, you know, before I was, you know, writing in my solo career, I was an assistant for Christopher Leonard for about 5-6 years, and doing a lot of score producing for him. So like I learned, you know, I had a lot of close contact with music editors and sound teams and all that stuff. So I try and think forward as much as possible to try and make everyone's life as easy as we can.
No, and I think having a knowledge, especially if you are an aspiring music supervisor, having a knowledge across all of these things is not gonna do anything but help you. And it's not gonna do anything but make you a more attractive candidate if you're going out into the job market, because you understand how all of these things work together and you understand them from the beginning, so you can have those conversations with the filmmaker before we even get to this point. Just left. It's gone. So that you can have these conversations with your filmmaker before you start getting into all of this. And if you're considering a career as a sound designer or a mixer, same deal. Looking into doing compositions or just writing music in general, and you want to look into having sync placement be one of your primary sources of income, this is all stuff that is absolutely worth considering and worth thinking about. And what Dara did not mention is that sometimes music comes in at the absolute last moment. And you end up having to run around and do a little bit of extra work to make things match keys, because your filmmaker has now fallen in love with this track that does not work with the composition at all, and we all thought we were done, and we're not. Yes, we got it? All right, we're gonna backtrack a little bit and look at this Diary of a Wimpy Kid clip, and I think discuss animation as an avenue. Great, excellent. So yeah, let's have a little bit of a discussion, because Dara, have you worked in animation?
I have.
You have, that's what I thought. Ken, you've worked in animation. Bobbi, have you worked in animation? Not much, but I do think it's a relevant conversation to have in terms of animation being a space where you're building out a sonic landscape from absolutely nothing. So we're not walking into it where we have shot somewhere, we have nat sound that we have to contend with, or we have room tone that we have to contend with. We are starting from the ground up and building every bit of minutia that we possibly can. So Ken, can you speak on building things out from scratch a little bit? And then Dara, please jump in where you can to talk about how music might fit into this concept.
For instance, on this project, what originally happens for us is we get all of the ADR or VO, it's usually called VO, in the animated world. So we get that, and sometimes we have to clean it up. We have a dialogue editor who cleans it up, he takes pops and makes sure that if there is any ambience that came from the room, that's smooth, right? So from that point, I give it to my sound designer and my sound effects editor. My sound effects editor typically starts by building out what we call the backgrounds, right? Which is, for instance, in that particular shot, it was kind of at night, so there were crickets and there was wind. This was like this eerie sort of forest. The more eeriness was probably more of a sound design thing. So he starts with the backgrounds, and then he'll do what we call hard effects, right? Which is like, for instance, the car hitting the ground, or the shifter, or you can hear the water balloons. All of that's kind of handled by the sound effects editor. And stuff that's a little more, how can I put this? It's not a diegetic sound. It's more of a like for instance, it wasn't in this particular clip, but there's a moment where the car jumps across a ravine, right? So all of the sounds in that particular moment are sound design moments, whether they're like these long, slow bushes and stuff like that. But in animation, as Aurelia said, we have to create everything. I mean, every little sound, all the footsteps, all the hand pats, everything that you would normally hear in the real world, which makes it a lot more work in a sense, but it also makes it a lot more creative. Last year was my first year of my company doing an animated movie, and we really fell in love with it. It was just so creative. And then, like I said, we did Night at the Museum this year, which took us to a whole another level. Because I don't know if you guys saw the movie itself, but where all the things come alive at night. All of that stuff, you know, there were dinosaurs and there were saber-toothed tigers and there were all these, and there were these sort of monsters that were dog soldiers, and all the sounds that they emitted, we had to create. Right? So it was highly creative and highly enjoyable. And then the music also helps us drive the scenes, right? So the score, if you see it, it's really beautiful, beautifully done, and we sort of interweave back and forth between sound design and music beautifully. So that's my experience with that.
Can you speak on how animation may be a little bit different than live action film?
Yeah, I mean, I personally really enjoy animation. To me, I get to be the loudest version of myself in animation, and you know, it's like, is that silly? Yes, go for it. But also, you know, there are moments where, again, you're working with sound or you're working after sound, and you know, someone is throwing a rock at someone's head, you hear the plunk, and then like, do we also do like a little xylophone trill? Do we hold off for a second and do a reaction of someone's, you know, someone's reaction to the plunk? And one specific thing in animation that happens more often than not are songs. Sometimes songs originally written for the animated film, or you know, sometimes also needle drops. But I feel like I deal with a lot more songs that were written for that particular project in animation than other things. And there are moments sometimes where, you know, they'd like to quote a little, you know, a melody of a song somewhere else in the score. And then, you know, that's a long process for music supervisors as well, and music editors and whoever has to deal with the cue sheet and keep track of every time those 4 notes are used in the score. Yeah, it is, I think that you do play around more with what is happening on this screen in a more literal way, and not necessarily like Mickey Mousing every action, because that depends on the filmmakers and the tone of film that they're trying to achieve. Yeah, again, I think you work more I think you work more closely with other departments in animation than you might in a live action. And also, I think music is brought on earlier in animation than other things, either because it's song or because it just takes a lot. And you know, I think animation really comes alive once the sound is there.
Okay, Bobbi, can you speak to how other aspects of sound, like dialogue, may fit in when it comes to music and composition or needle drop music, how ADR fits into this as well?
I think it's kind of difficult to talk about that because actually it's only during the mix that we start leveling out, because we don't really have that interaction with music until then. Until then. So that's one reason why I brought that piece there, because it was in the mix that everything, you know, comes together, it blends, it lowers underneath dialogue, so you can hopefully hear the dialogue in some scenes. But then that all depends on the director, you know, we're on the mix stage and what they want to hear the most. So it's unfortunately we don't spend time.
Well, I'm going to jump on you for another question. So what I would like to know, and I'm going to have,
Let's look at it. Okay.
everybody's going to come into this as well, but number one, what are things that you find that may be challenging about your position? And number two, why would you tell somebody to find a job like yours?
You think I would? No, just I think what's been challenging for me is number one, because I'm Black. And so it's how to be in the room with people. And like I was on an ADR stage, and I was the only person of color in the room, which I am most of the time. But in this instance, the actor had to do his lines over again, and he was a little bit too long, right? So I'm letting him know then I'm sorry, but can we do another take? Can you just speed it up just a little bit? And he turned around, she says, I have to, like that kind of attitude out loud. So, but what he did do it a little bit quicker, and he saw that it was now in sync. So from that point on, he was fine, right? So you're always having to prove yourself even more when you're in a room. I've had, people that smiles like, our seats are flat. It's like that because you feel it when you walk in. And so those are, just some examples of what I have experienced, what I still experience. Because what happens is, I guess, as you're an apprentice, you get a lot of work. And this, as a person of color, you get a lot of work. You're an assistant and you get a lot of work. You start editing and then you get a little less work. Then you start supervising. And oh my goodness. You know what I mean? It's like those people that you worked with before, they're like, they don't pick up your calls, they don't, so you have to just get out there and fight even more for jobs. And then because when you're supervising, you're now, as far as ADR is concerned, or supervising sound editor, you're dealing with the studio execs, you're dealing with the director, you're dealing with talent, you're on the stage, and you're now making decisions. And they don't necessarily want you to have that job. So it's just all a matter of how to approach different situations, how to make like if I'm on the ADR stage with a director I've never worked with before, I can hear something that they don't hear. So I usually like write little Post-its and I like pass it to them so that it becomes their idea. And then they actually, they appreciate it because I'm not trying to override them, even though I'm hearing something they don't hear, because they're not, ears might not be trained for that. But
That takes a massive amount of dedication on your part to know and want the final project to be so good that you're going to take something off of your own ego and say, maybe we'll make it his idea, because that's what's going to get it done.
It's all team effort, you know what I mean? And they really appreciate it. And then they start saying some words that I would say. I was like, yeah, you got it. You know what I mean? And so, and you have to develop that rapport. And the other thing is, they don't, a lot of people just think that we don't know what we're doing because it's just the way that, people think. And so it starts to open up their minds and their hearts that they're regular people. And we want the best for the project. And I think that, then you start developing relationships. I hope that answers you.
It does. That was an excellent answer. Thank you so much. Ken, Dara, do you have any, challenging moments in your careers, or how? 15. Oh, thank you. Thank you, 15. Or why you would counsel somebody to pursue the path that you pursued?
Yeah, to sort of piggyback off of what Bobbi said, I'm what you call a boutique studio. I'm not Warner Brothers, I'm not Universal. Small shop. So I would love to have an ADR supervisor on my staff like Bobbi, but I don't. So I have to do that myself, which I do enjoy. And so, it's being a small shop, it is challenging because I have to end up doing a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats. I have to do, the billing and the invoicing, got to do sound design and the mixing and do all these things. I have a staff of 6 people that are my internal team, most of who are, all but one who are African American. They are, in their 20s and 30s, and I'm sort of mentoring them and bringing them up so that I can kind of step back at some point and kind of be semi-retired, right? Just be the face. So, it's a lot when you're on your own facility, and of course, example. So I get a call from Fox Searchlight about a movie. So they're like, well, we want you to bid on this movie. And so I asked, well, what's the budget of the movie? He tells me, okay, this is how much we got. So, you know, I write up a bid saying, okay, we'll do this, and it'll cost you, you know, a little less than what you originally told me you had. Didn't get that movie, and I thought about it, and I said, well, okay, I have to do something. Next time I have to do something different, right? I'm gonna actually, unfortunately, have to bid a lot lower. Which means I won't make the same amount of money as say Formosa or Smart Post, because they're gonna bid along those same lines, right? So if they bid, because they're bigger, if they bid, say the movie is $370 and I bid $350, right? And they've got that same information, they're bidding as well, $370, and they bid $350, because they are a larger organization, right? They're more than likely gonna get it, right? So for me, I'm gonna have to take less money. Not that I deserve less money, because I don't, because I feel as though I'm as talented really as anybody they have. So, you know, that's frustrating, you know, for a small shop, you know, to have to do that, to have to take more than you're really worth, because of the, you know, it's the nature of the business and competitiveness, you know. You know, I mean, I worked on, you know, big projects, had, you know, probably 200 credits, you know, 1 Emmy, I have all of that, you know, but I'm still gonna have to work for less in order to get the job, which isn't fair, but, you know. And I was realizing, I was like, man, that's, you know, I have to do that, otherwise I'm not gonna get it. You know, unless I had, the only way I would get it is if I had a really strong relationship with the executive producer or somebody like that, then I might have a shot at it. But if I'm just blind bidding against one of those other companies, and also being an African-American company, you know, I'm not gonna get it, you know, unless I lower my price. So maybe they get $350, maybe I have to bid $250. Right? Is that fair? No. But $250 is better than $0. What was the other part of the question?
Well, I think you answered a lot of that question. Very well, thank you. Dara?
Yeah, I think as far as kind of day-to-day workflow goes, one of the most difficult parts is finding the best way to please everyone. And, you know, especially if there are times where the directors and the executive producers in the studio, they all want different things. And finding the best way to make everyone feel heard. Because you don't want any one of those people to leave that experience saying, oh, she didn't listen to me. So finding ways to make everyone feel heard. Oh. Because everyone wants to, you know, have their creative vision followed through to the end. So sometimes it's taking a little bit from that note, a little bit from that note. A lot of times alts are very helpful. So here's a version with this person's note address. Here's the version with this person's note address. And everyone hears it at once, and then collectively they can decide what's actually best for the project. Because maybe they didn't understand what the other person's note was, and realizing that, oh, actually that is the most helpful solution for this. So I think it's really kind of the interpersonal, you know, HR-ness of it all, which is why, you know, music supervisors are so helpful, especially in those situations, because they can really guide everyone from not a neutral point, but sort of neutral, because like it's easier sometimes.
You said it.
Yeah. But sometimes, you know, things will sound better coming from them than they would for me. Where they can say, well, Dara actually meant this when she did this. This is the way I'm interpreting this, instead of being, you know, me saying like, well, this is why I wrote this. So having music supervisors to lean back on for that kind of support, emotional or otherwise, has been really helpful. So I think I mean, anyone who's going to do it, they're going to do it, whether I recommend it or not. So it's just, you know, knowing that writing the music is such a small part of the job at the end of the day.
Good, excellent, excellent. So one thing that I want to point out about these three absolute icons that I'm happy to be joined with today is that you see their scope of work, right? Their scope of work is fantastic. They work on all different sorts and kinds of projects. So if there's anybody here that is looking to pursue a career in the industry, please, and they are a person of color, they are a Black person, please know that do not allow that to hinder you, and do not allow other people's perception of what that might mean to hinder you in terms of what kind of work you're being offered or what kind of work you're going to do. You can do absolutely any kind of work because you are immensely talented and good at your job.
Can I hop in there real quick?
Please.
So one of the reasons why I chose the tender bar was because, and that is one thing that I think is getting better now. But a lot of times when I would submit for briefs, it was like, okay, so we've got this show. It's about an inner city girl and her struggles. They want lots of trappies. And I was like, all right. But, you know, I think I personally have like kind of a folksy soul. So it's nice to be able to have the opportunities to write for things like the Tender Bar and like animated projects and things that are, because again, anyone can learn anything well. The internet exists, you know, schools exist, it's amazing what any random person can learn. So yeah, so just kind of showing that I think the scope of work that I'm being approached for now is a lot wider.
So we're going to take the last few minutes to see if anybody has any questions at all about anything that we discussed today. Any question is a good question. Yes.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for this panel. This has been a tremendous panel. Sharing your expertise with us it's phenomenal. So thank you for being here today. My question is for Ken. You were speaking about background effects versus hard effects, and I guess that's a two-part question. When you're doing sound design for environments, do you ever do mobile recording within the actual space, like outdoors found sound, for those softer background effects that might be multi-layered, where you've got birds chirping and the ocean at the same time? And then the second part of the question is, for mobile recording, is something as simple as like a Rode NT5 and like a Zoom H4n, you know, handheld recorder. Is that something that works sonically?
I mean, the answer to your first question is yes. Depending on the film, you know, we do some location or remote recording. But for the most part, you know, we probably got 12 terabytes of sound effects, you know, that range from, you know, rivers and winds on a prairie, you know, all that stuff. So unless it's really specific, we'll use our library, right? But if it's something that, you know, we really feel that would enhance the film or the television show by being there and recording it, meaning that it would be different than anything that we have, then yeah, we would do that. If I were, you know, you could do it with that. Now, I'm not sure which particular Zoom, is it Zoom?
Yeah, it just says.
Is it recording like quad?
It's the stereo, it's got the XY on it.
XY?
Yeah.
If you could get a mobile device that would actually give you quad recording, it would be good, because then you'd have the front and you'd have some surround coverage as well. So if you could get one of those, I think it would be better for you. But you know, digital recording has come a long way, you know, and if you are mindful about how you record it and levels and stuff, I think you can get great sound from almost anything these days.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, I have one question. What, in your experience, again, what would be some tips for not only breaking into the industry, but also creating a sustainable career within the industry?
I'm sorry, say the question.
Just a couple of golden nuggets of how to break into the industry and also how to create a career already in the industry.
How to be sustainable, how to have longevity.
I think, you know, like if you can get an internship somewhere, that especially like at a studio, because they have so many various departments, and then go to visit, go ask questions like crazy, like no small question is stupid or whatever, and just be a people person, you know what I mean? Be open to hear what they have to say, any advice that they have to give. Your integrity means a lot. And, you know, your push, your drive, people watch that and they take you seriously. So then they'll open up more to you. You know, so then you can start building relationships.
Awesome. Any last questions before we go? No? Okay, awesome. Thank you for joining us. You know, visit Post and Black